Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to explore a really profound medical and philosophical paradigm shift found right in the foundational texts of a worldwide recovery movement. We are diving into a book published back in the 1930s that absolutely reshaped how the world understands the seemingly hopeless condition of alcoholism. It's a fascinating journey, honestly, one that bridges the gap between science, psychology, and the human spirit. Here is our roadmap for today. To understand this paradigm shift, we'll quickly look at the fellowship's purpose and anonymity, then dive into the doctor's opinion, the actual mechanics of allergy and obsession, the illusion of control, and finally, the ultimate solution, a complete psychic change. Okay, Section 1, Purpose and Anonymity. Let's look at the core mission. So the authors of this text had one laser-focused goal. They weren't trying to write some dense theoretical medical journal or preach a brand new religion. Actually, their primary purpose was incredibly practical, mapping out the exact step-by-step process of their own survival to save others. They just wanted to provide precise instructions to pull other alcoholics back from the brink. Now, to ensure this life-saving message wasn't corrupted, they had to establish exactly what they were not. To protect their rapidly growing numbers and, keep human egos in check, they established strict rules of public anonymity. They also completely removed all financial barriers, absolutely no fees, no dues. They deliberately avoided allying with any specific sect or denomination and insisted that their work to help others remained strictly an unpaid avocation. Basically, it was a movement built purely on altruism. And because this simple, anonymous mission was totally stripped of controversy, fees, and personal glory, it spread like wildfire. It rapidly transcended borders and cultures. Going from just a small group in the 1930s, the text has now been translated into countless languages, bringing the exact same lifeline to sufferers all across the globe. Moving right along to Section 2, the doctor's opinion. Let's get a medical perspective. To fully grasp the gravity of their solution, we really need to understand how medical professionals of the 1930s viewed this condition. Frankly, they were at the end of their ropes. We're introduced to a prominent physician specializing in addiction who candidly admitted that standard psychiatric and medical efforts of the time were making very little impression on the problem as a whole. They were treating patients they considered entirely hopeless, often just locking them in sanitariums with no real cure in sight. Yet, this very same doctor witnessed what he considered literally impossible: chronic, hopeless patients returning to health after adopting the program outlined in this book. So the crucial takeaway here is that this doctor confirmed a revolutionary idea for the era. They realized they weren't just dealing with a psychological issue or some sort of moral failing. No, they were dealing with a profound physical sickness as well. He noted that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. Any picture of the alcoholic that left out this physical factor was just fundamentally incomplete. Which brings us perfectly to Section 3, Allergy and Obsession. The idea of a twofold disease. They hypothesized that alcoholism is a deadly twofold combination. First, the body suffers from an allergy, and by that they meant an abnormal physiological reaction that physically forces a craving once alcohol enters the system. But here's the real kicker: this physical craving is paired with a mental obsession. It's a tragic delusion that convinces the person they can safely take that very first drink, genuinely believing that this time they'll somehow be able to control it. And this creates a tragic, inescapable loop that completely traps the sufferer. It usually starts when they feel restless, irritable, and discontented. So to find some ease, they take a few drinks. Instantly, that physical allergy triggers the phenomenon of craving, leading to a total loss of control. Eventually, they emerge remorseful, making a firm, rock-solid resolution to never drink again. But because of that mental obsession we just talked about, they inevitably repeat the cycle. It really highlights why the condition is so incredibly hopeless to fight all on your own. Next up, Section 4, the illusion of control and why willpower fails. Now, you might be asking yourself a very logical question. If the consequences are so utterly severe, destroying families, careers, and health, why can't sheer willpower and self-knowledge just stop the cycle? Why can't a smart, highly capable person simply think their way out of this trap? Well, the doctor notes that tears, promises, and logical reasoning, what he famously calls frothy emotional appeals, are completely useless against this phenomenon. You can explain the medical damage, wives can beg, employers can threaten, but those surface-level emotional pleas simply bounce right off the true alcoholic. The message that can actually interest and hold these folks must have serious depth and weight. The terrifying reality explained in the text is that a true alcoholic completely loses the power of choice in drink. Their willpower becomes practically non-existent. At that critical moment of temptation, they essentially forget the pain and humiliation of their last bender. They are unable to bring it into their consciousness with sufficient force. The memory of the suffering simply cannot compete with that mental obsession telling them that, hey, this time it will for sure be different. This leads us to our final part, Section 5, a complete psychic change, the ultimate solution. So, what's the answer? The doctor concluded that unless this person experiences a radical, complete psychic change, there is practically zero hope of recovery. And we aren't just talking about a slight shift in perspective here. It is described as a huge emotional displacement and rearrangement. The ideas, emotions, and attitudes that once guided their entire life must be completely cast aside and then replaced by an entirely new set of conceptions and motives. What's truly astonishing here is that a leading medical man of science essentially handed the baton over to spirituality and altruism. He flat out admitted that human power and synthetic medical knowledge alone were fundamentally inadequate to produce this required psychic change. To actually recreate their lives and overcome the craving, their ideals had to be grounded in a power greater than themselves, or a deep moral psychology. Science alone just wasn't enough. As you reflect on this medical and philosophical paradigm shift, a shift that has literally helped millions worldwide, ask yourself a question. If an illness systematically destroys both the mind and the body while rendering willpower entirely useless, isn't a cure that heals the spirit the only logical answer? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this provided a fascinating look into the mechanics of this groundbreaking approach to recovery.